Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. It is that time once again to take a look at the biggest changes coming to the next patch, patch 7.14. There's quite a bit of things to cover. There's a lot of reworks, whether it's to items, stats, or even champions. And on top of that, we of course have a new champion coming out, Kane. So quite a bit of stuff to cover. So as per usual, if you guys end up enjoying this video and you want me to continue doing these patch videos every 2 weeks, then let me know by simply hitting that like button. But let us not waste any more time and get right into the biggest changes coming for patch 7.14. So first, let's talk about what arguably is the biggest change coming to this next patch, and that's going to be the release of Kane. Now, Kane is the newest champion coming to League of Legends, and he is primarily a jungler. From my experience, he can be definitely played in the top lane and as well in the mid lane, though without question, he is most effective in the jungle. So here are my quick thoughts about Kane. He first has a basic form, which is decently strong and it has decent amount of damage. He's got fantastic wave clear and pushing potential with his Q ability. He can clear the jungle with his Q very quickly. His ganking power as well is really strong because of his E ability, letting him literally go through walls. But after attacking certain types of champions a certain amount, you're able to transform into a red form or a blue form. The red form is attacking melee champions, the blue form is attacking ranged champions. The idea here is to try and aim for about a 10-minute transformation, give or take about 2 minutes. Anything above, I would say 14 minutes, and you're definitely behind. The red form is a much tankier, bruiser-esque kind of form where he has a lot of percent damage in his Q and his ultimate as well, and it's gonna be probably the more consistent form, the one you'll see more often than not because of just how well it can perform and just how much more reliable it is. The blue form, of course, attacking ranged champions is gonna be the assassin form, which gives him a lot more mobility. His W becomes just a better ability because he can use it while moving, but the damage on him is gonna be a lot better mid-game, but scale off later in the game because it is all base damage. There's no percent damage at all. This one is not as reliable, but it is much more snowbally. The power of this blue form is much stronger mid-game, and you're able to just simply close out games if played properly much more effectively than the red form. So all in all, if you're feeling good, if you're feeling you can carry the game and you can do a lot of work, the blue form is better. But if you want to maybe kind of play towards your team composition, or you want to be more reliable and play a much more consistent role, then the red form is probably better. Alright guys, but moving on to the next topic that I want to talk about that's also a pretty damn big change coming to the next patch is of course going to be the lethality rework. Now I have made other videos talking about the lethality rework, and I even have one video specifically focused talking about the rework and even giving you guys several different new lethality builds that you can run on champions like Zed, champions like Talon, and even jungle champions like Rengar and Shaco. So if you want a really super in-depth video, I highly recommend checking that one out, but regardless, let's quickly go over the lethality rework. So first and foremost, lethality now scales off of your level, not the enemy's level, which means if you're playing someone like maybe Zed in the mid lane and you're doing well, you know, you're snowballing, you're higher level than most of the enemy champions, well, especially compared to bot lane, you'll be at least 2, maybe even 3 levels above them, so going onto them and trying to kill them will be that much more effective. On top of this, also all the lethality items got reworked, where now Youmuu's Ghostblade is actually much more focused and centered on roaming. Duskblade now has a base damage which scales based on your level from 100 to about 330-ish. It is now also physical damage, which is good for Zed since it will stack up onto his ultimate. It also offers you 10% CDR, is just cheaper overall, and it's just a really good first item buy now. And Edge of Night is just better in more scenarios now since it does offer HP rather than MR. Again, if you want much more in-depth information regarding this rework, definitely check out my lethality rework video. But let's move on to the champion changes and even champion reworks that are also coming into this patch because there's quite a bit of stuff going on here. Now first, there is a rework happening to Cho'Gath, but first there's a slight change happening to his Q where the mana cost has been lowered, but the damage has been ever so slightly decreased to the point where it only has been lowered by 5 damage by rank 5. I mean, why they did this is completely beyond me, but it is there. And on top of this, the silence duration on his W has been, I mean, very slightly buffed in the earlier ranks, then it kind of falls off at the later ranks, but then by rank 5 it's the same. Don't really understand what the purpose is. The changes are just completely trivial, but I mean, it still is there. But here's where things get much more interesting. His E ability has been reworked. It'll now cost you 30 mana at all ranks. The cooldown starts at 8 and goes down to 4, and the ability does as follows. Cho'Gath's next 3 basic attacks launch spikes that deal 20 up to 80 base damage plus 30% AP plus X%, which is 4% plus 0.5% per fee stack of enemies' maximum health as magic damage, and apply a 30 up to 50% slow decaying over the next second and a half. So essentially his E ability has been changed from being what arguably was kind of a passive ability that didn't really offer that much and it was just sort of there for the sake of being there, to an actual ability that does quite a bit of damage, works really well when attacking tanks, and you're able to just essentially kill tanks with your ultimate without any issues whatsoever. Because the base damage on this ability isn't really anything too impressive, but again, the fact that it scales off of enemies' maximum health as magic damage does make it somewhat interesting. Next up, we also have a rework happening to Diana. Now, there's been a bit more changes ever since I talked about her about a week ago. So her passive has been changed from giving Diana flat 20% attack speed to Diana's spellcasts grant her 20% attack speed for her next 3 basic attacks. And on top of this, her passive has yet a new effect where it states the following: every third strike restores 15 mana, which is actually just scaling off 15% of your AP, and cleaves nearby enemies for an additional 20 plus 80 magical damage. Following this, the cooldown on her Q ability has been lowered, the mana cost on her W has also been lowered, and her E ability now has a new passive effect, which is essentially her old passive effect now onto the E ability, where it increases the attack speed gain for Moon Silver Blade up to 90% starting at 50. So they sort of changed around the way Diana works, where her passive still gives her the attack speed bonus, but it works differently now. It's only for 3 auto attacks, and it also synergizes now with her E ability with how much attack speed it actually offers. A little bit awkward, I'm not gonna lie, and not really sure why they changed it to such a way where leveling up her E ability actually in turn also makes her passive better, but it's pretty cool and I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Following this, we also have some nerfs happening to Fiora, arguably the strongest top laner in the game. Now, the first of which is going to be to her passive, where the movement speed has just been flat out lowered. On top of this, her ultimate no longer grants passive's movement speed bonus inside the area. So, sticking on your target with your ultimate or just in general is going to be slightly more difficult for Fiora, though I doubt it'll change too much since her Q ability is still insanely good. Following this, we also have a rework happening to Garen. The first of which is towards Garen's passive, where essentially it's just been changed in how long it takes to proc and how much healing you actually get. It looks a little confusing, but TLDR, it essentially just works better and it'll give you the healing in a better way, in a much faster way, and at earlier levels, and it just overall is a buff to the passive in my opinion. But there's also a new effect to his passive, where if he's below a certain HP threshold, he will actually heavily increase the amount his passive is healing him by quite a bit. His W has also been changed to where now whenever you activate it, the defense effects that the W offers will be much stronger for the first about 0.75 seconds, and then it'll fall off and give you a fraction of what it initially offered you for the remainder of the effect. His E ability's total damage ratio has been increased ever so slightly as well. So you can see here a lot of changes happening to Garen, essentially a rework happening to him as well, a bunch of new effects especially to his passive, but I honestly don't feel like this will be enough to bring him back into the meta. Following this, we also have a very slight buff happening to Ramus, where his defensive ball curl, the W, the self-slow, has been lowered from 60% to 30%, so when he's in this form, he's able to essentially just be a bit more mobile. But following this, we have yet another rework happening to Singed, where the base health and the health growth has actually both been increased, and his passive has been completely reworked. It does the following: Singed will draft off of nearby champions, gaining 20% movement speed for 2 seconds, and each champion has a 10-second cooldown. This works on all champions. And you can see here a quick example or a quick gif of just exactly how this looks like with the target dummies. But it doesn't stop just there for Singed, because the AP ratio on his Q has been increased by 10%, the damage has actually been changed to be higher overall. His W has also been changed to where the mana cost has been lowered, the cooldown has been changed, the slow has also been changed to 40% at all ranks, the adhesive duration has been lowered to only 3 seconds, but it now has a new effect where champions inside the W are now considered to be grounded, which essentially means they cannot use any movement type abilities like flash, like teleport, things like Akali's ultimate, or things like Ezreal's E ability, very similar to how Cassiopeia's W works as well. His E ability's mana cost has been lowered, the mana cost on his ultimate has been lowered, and the stat bonus changed has been increased at ranks 2 and 3. So this is going to be quite an interesting change to Singed, and I'm actually curious if this will bring him back into the meta, because I feel like there is a slight chance that this will make Singed much stronger and he'll be much more obnoxious to deal with. But there's only one way to find out, and I'm really excited to see what happens. Now there's also a pretty decently big change happening to Taric as well, to which I'm not entirely sure if it's a buff, but it feels like it is. So you can see here his Q has had a significant amount of changes, but TLDR, it feels like if you actually level up his Q ability first, it just becomes more effective and better. On top of this, his E ability now scales down in CDR per rank better rather than just being 15 seconds at all ranks. The magic damage has been increased by quite a decent amount as well, and the stun duration has also been changed to be 1.25 seconds at all ranks rather than going all the way up to 1.5 seconds by rank 5. Again, it does feel like it's an overall buff to Taric, but I'm not 100% sure as my experience with this champion is quite limited. Now very quickly, there was quite a massive Udyr rework as well on PvE server, but it has been reverted with a really good chance of it coming back on the next cycle, so it's not coming out to this live server just yet. But next up, there's actually some buffs coming to Yorick of all champions, which is kind of surprising, but it seems like they're pretty good buffs. The first of which is going to be to his passive, where the ghouls now immediately attack upon landing with his E ability. The radius that the ghouls react to the E has also been increased by 400, which is quite a bit. And the damage on the ghouls has been adjusted to be a little bit lower at the earlier ranks, but as you level up, it'll actually scale a little bit better and they'll do overall more damage later on into the game. On top of this, his ultimate, the cooldown has actually been changed to be lower at the 2nd rank and the 3rd rank, and the HP of the maiden has actually been increased by a total of 1000 by rank 3. So this will make his slow push power late game a lot stronger, so maybe late game Yorick can become quite a scary thing. Again, not entirely sure, don't really see Yorick too often, but this may slowly become the return of the champion. Following this, there's also a mini rework happening to Smite, a completely new effect on this ability, which I did talk about earlier, but I'll quickly reiterate. Smite can now also be used on medium monsters. Now the Krug has been changed from a small monster to a medium monster, so when you kill the first big Krug and they split into the 2 smaller ones, you can actually smite those ones as well. This can easily lead up to a bunch of new possibilities and different things that you can do with that specific camp, and I feel like they're going to be changing Smite a little bit more down the line in the future to kind of work off of this a little bit better and make Smite potentially usable on more things. Now last but not least, we also have a new item followed by a rework happening to Thornmail. Bramble Vest is going to be the new armor item that builds into Thornmail, costing you 900 gold, building out of 2 cloth armors plus 300 gold for the recipe, offering you 35 armor and a unique passive called Thorns, where upon being hit by a basic attack you reflect 20 magic damage and you inflict grievous wounds on the attacker for 1 second. This is an extremely cost efficient item against AD champions, especially against AD carries that like to build lifesteal or you like to use Warlord's Bloodlust, because this will just completely for free offer a grievous wounds debuff on the champion, and it'll make them lifestealing and sustaining through your armor, and especially through Thornmail, that much more difficult, especially if you're someone like Ramus. Because Thornmail has also been reworked where it'll now cost you 2900 gold building out of a Bramble Vest, giving you 250 health, 75 armor, the Thorns passive effect as well, which is essentially the same thing, but it now scales with your 10% of bonus armor, and it will also offer you the Cold Steel passive, which is similar to the Randuin's one, where basic attacks reduce the attacker's speed by 15% for 1 second. Again, this item is just made to just flat out counter ADCs, so if you're a tank and you're in the backline tanking the ADCs and you have Bramble Vest and or Thornmail, this is gonna make the ADC's life a living nightmare. But either way guys, that is about it for this video. There you have it, a whole bunch of new changes coming to patch 7.14. A lot of big ones, a lot of reworks, new champions, new items, just a whole lot of information. So hopefully this video made it a little bit more clear and easier to understand. If you guys enjoyed this video, then definitely hit it with that like button to show your support, especially if you want me to continue doing these patch videos as well. But I truly thank each and every one of you for watching. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, check out my other videos as well, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys for the next video. Peace.